is a U.S. congressman, a civil rights and human rights icon, just recently passed from with struggling against pancreatic cancer. And he just passed at 80 years old. And I hope you wouldn't mind indulging me and joining me. I want to give a minute of my time in silence in recognition of this amazing human being. And I want to do that because I'm really clear and obvious that it wasn't for people like John Lewis, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here to make this presentation to all of you. So I think it's important he gave so much of his self and his life for people like myself and like, quite frankly, like for all of us, because he was also a human rights activist. I just want to give him a minute or two of my time. So I'm going to ask you if you would please give a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your participating and being respectful of that. It's so interesting and ironic that you took a moment to be quiet. And I hope in that moment you had an opportunity to reflect in that silent moment, because that also is what I hope to speak to you about today, the importance of taking a moment to be silent, to be still, and to reflect. And so, as it was already shared, so I am a passionate educator. I'm grateful to be able to do my heart's work as an educator. I'm also a lifelong learner. I enjoy learning, and so this experience today is not just an opportunity for me to share what I hope to be some useful strategies, but also for me to learn from my colleagues today. But one of the things I pride myself on being that's very intentional is being a reflective practitioner and to be an avid story sharer. And I'm going to share with you today how I believe those two can be melded together and in a way to really help all of us as educators to motivate, engage, and hopefully to inspire not just ourselves, but also others. So, you know, today it's in our world, I think we can all say that we're living in some really interesting times, and maybe perhaps even unsettling times, as we addressing both the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as in many ways a racial pandemic across the globe. And in these times, education has been significantly impacted. It is evolving, and many of us have heard, you know, catchphrases like a new normal. I don't know what that quite means, but I definitely know as a lifelong educator that education is not stagnant. And as one of society's major social institutions, we're impacted by the things that impact society. And I've been observing, hopefully like many of you, that we've had many individuals as well as organizations who have to make critical decisions that impact students, to impact our young people today. And you know, the decision makers vary, and the types of decisions also vary, but ultimately the impact for us as educators is how does it impact our young people and their ability to not just learn, but to be whole and to be safe. And I've often observed that sometimes, not often, but sometimes many of these decisions seem to be made in haste, or they seem to be made without a clear sense of what's the rationale behind that. And this is an area where I certainly believe that reflective practice can be helpful. The other piece is, it also been hearing from many of my colleagues, just questioning, sometimes a doubt. They feel overwhelmed by many of the things that's going on, and not everyone, but sometimes you hear people have conversations about wondering about, gosh, what am I doing? And am I making an impact? And can I continue to make an impact? And where is our profession going? And all these sorts of questions that come up in our minds. And it's times like that where I feel that there's an opportunity for us to tap into our personal stories. Something I'm going to talk about is our personal why. And to tap into that as a source of engagement, as a source of motivation for others, and also hopefully as a source of inspiration for ourselves. So with that in mind, I hope you'll join me. So today, my intention is sort of to provoke you into being a consistent reflective practitioner and story sharer. And first I'm going to say, if you already are, I commend you. I think what I'm going to share today is not necessarily rocket science. It may be, quite frankly, really simple, but I think that often sometimes simple strategies can be highly effective. And so for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to ask you to open up your mind. I'm going to ask you to mentally get into your card. I've given you a variety of cards to choose from. I, for a host of reasons, have chosen that beautiful yellow right there in the bottom. And let's take the next 20 minutes and let's travel together on a journey to understand and to experience the power of how reflecting upon your why. And that why is an acronym for your what, your how, your why, and then something that I've coined as your personal why. So jump in your car, because what we're going to do today is hopefully confirm your what, affirm your how, reflect upon your why, and then ultimately share your story. So by the end of this part of this presentation today, hopefully you'll be able to explain the importance of being a reflective practitioner. Hopefully I'll be able to articulate the key elements of a specific reflection model. And this is the critical piece. Hopefully you'll be able to unpack your why as educators. And at every level, I mean, educators at the individual, as a team, and even as a district and an organization, in order to access your personal why. And then, I'm gonna move your images here so I can see better. There we go. In order to be able to, once you tap into that personal story, to use that as a means of being able to motivate, engage, and inspire not just yourself, because you need to do that sometimes too, but also others. So what does it mean to be a reflective practitioner? So a reflective practitioner is someone who at regular intervals, and that's the critical thing, who consistently looks back at the work that they do, at their work process, and it considers how they can improve. They reflect upon what they have done in order to hopefully improve and do better. And I want to position that reflective practicing in practice is not just useful in terms of looking back at what you've done, but it's also, once you get used to the habit of doing it, something you can do to preempt what you're about to do. You kind of go through a mental model in your head and thinking about what are the steps you're going to take? How are they going to be impactful? What can you do to make them impactful? And if they're impactful, what's the result of that? What's the outcome of that? So I'm going to argue that reflective practicing is not just a backward step, if you will, if not just a reflection, but it's also a practice that can help you prepare as you move forward as well. I'm going to figure out where I could put this. It's not blocking my screen. There we go. So what is the importance of reflective practice? It has huge benefits in increasing self-awareness. as educators. It's a key component of emotional intelligence. I think we've heard a lot of people talk about the importance of that, and also just developing a better understanding of others. This is critically important, particularly in schools and in the education setting. We know that young people can benefit from not just their teachers using reflective practice, but also from students having an opportunity to reflective practice as well. And it can help develop a culture, an understanding where we take the time to think about our actions and our behaviors and to understand why people do what we do. It can also help to develop your creative thinking process. There's something powerful about pausing and being okay with sitting still and being silent. And that can also encourage people's active engagement. Sometimes I've even noticed that when someone is speaking or when you're participating in something and someone pauses, people tend to look to see why they're pausing. It's an active form of engagement. It not just gets you engaged into what you're doing, but it also gets you engaged with what others are doing. So there are different types of frameworks for reflective practice, but I definitely encourage you to develop a structural process to guide your active reflection. And you can choose what model or framework that works best for you from your experiences. I'm going to share with you one. But before I share with you one, I know one of the questions that often come up before is, what are different things you can do? So sometimes you'll hear that people who are consistent in terms of being reflective practice, they'll keep a journal, for example. And in that journal, they'll log their thoughts and actions and the why steps behind that. Another effective practice is peer observation. Having a peer come in to observe you doing your work, or having a peer to sit down and engage you in a conversation and be a thought partner, and to give you an opportunity to walk through and think through what you've done or what you even will do prior to taking action, or once you've taken action, to give you some viable feedback as to what you've done. But I'll share with you a very simple but effective framework that I've used. It's a framework for reflective practice by Professor Gary Rolfe. And interestingly enough, I'm talking about education, and I think that by that I mean all of us who have the fortunate opportunity to work in service of young people and impact them in terms of learners. But Gary Rolfe is a professor of nursing. And so the health profession has been a little ahead of the curve of us in terms of implementing reflective practice. And that's helpful for us. I'm glad to hear that in the medical profession and in the health professions, they are reflecting, since it's so critical to our well-being. But Rolfe's minimal model, and it's a minimal model simply, it's a simple 3 questions. So what happened? And what did this mean to you? So why is it important? The so what? And then the now what? So what are you going to do with it? So that simple process of what actually happened? So what? What did that mean to you? Why is that important? And then now what? And the critical thing with this singular model is that it gets you to not just be caught up in your thoughts, but to then take action. What are you going to do as a result of that thinking process? How are you going to take that further? So based upon these simple questions, the what question is a description of the activity or the event that you do. What actually happened? What did you see? What did you do? What were you trying to achieve? And what actions did you take? The so what is the analysis of the event or the action. So how did I feel at the time? What were the effects of what I did or I didn't do? So what could or should I have done to make it better? And what is my new understanding of the situation? So in this reflective process, there's an opportunity to not just regurgitate what transpired, but to actually begin to do some analysis and to do some thought as to what may have transpired. And then the most critical piece, I believe, which is that now what? Now what? So what are your proposed actions after following this activity? what's the implications of what I've described or analyzed? How can I modify my practice? Is there something I can do differently if I were to do this again? And how can I learn and develop in order to move forward? And so these three simple questions are the sorts of questions you can ask yourself as you're reflecting upon the work and the craft that you do. And I think that that reflection is so critically important, because once you take action, that action will impact young people, and that will impact our students. So taking pause to think about what you have done and how you will do things differently is a demonstrated way to show how you care for the well-being of our young people, and how you as a professional understand the importance of the craft that you are engaged in. So being a reflective practitioner, it can improve the way you work. It can improve your sense of self-awareness. And that's so vitally important, how aware of you in terms of the impact of what you do. It can help you develop a better understanding of others, particularly in your reflection process, in your analysis of what transpired. If you give thought about how what you did impacted other people, it can open you up to better understanding how you can work with those people in a different way. And hopefully there's something powerful about just, again, like I said before, given an opportunity to stimulate your creative thinking skills. So many people argue that we seem to be losing sometimes the ability to afford young people the chance to be creative, and the ability to afford our teachers and our educators to be creative in their thinking and in their action taking. I think this allows an opportunity for us to do that. So I want to build a bridge here between the practice of reflecting on a regular basis about your actions, and think about your thoughts and about your actions and what you're going to do differently as you move forward. And then to translate that into tapping into, and I believe that what I refer to as your story, and I believe that we all have a personal story, and how often do we get an opportunity to tap into that personal story? So I want to talk to you about unpacking your why. So I'll give an overall example I've utilized myself, okay? So in a general sense, in a broader sense of going through that, my notion of my unpacking my why, what do you do? So I am fortunate that I am an educator. I serve as a mentor, an equity advocate, and a servant leader. And how do I do those things? Well, I do those things by teaching, coaching, advising, learning, supporting, and hopefully motivating and inspiring others. Now, why do I do those things? Well, I am driven to be of service to others. That's my heart work. That's my life work, doing service to others. And I have a really strong passion to believe in the right of all students to learn. So that's my why, my core why. But what I'm going to argue and push for is that we all have another why. Sometimes that's small why, but that why is so significant. It is that individual why. It represents that personal story that can be shared when you reflect upon your why. It's that story that's unique and special to you, and it's a story that's worth sharing. And it's a story that, though it's unique and special to you, when you share it, you'll find that sometimes, not often, but sometimes that story can resonate with others and allow you to build a bridge and a gate between teacher and student, between teacher to teacher, student to student, or just educator to educator. So I want to take a little time, just a couple minutes, and share with you my story and share with you my personal why. So I'm an educator, and I'm grateful and proud to be one. And my personal why is connected to my maternal grandfather. So my maternal grandfather passed away about 20 years ago. And he lived a very full, rich life. He lived to be 100 years old. He was born around 1900, 1901. A little hard to know exactly because around those times they didn't keep good statistics on birth rates for African Americans. But he was born and raised here in America in the Deep South, in Mississippi, around the turn of the century near the Delta. And he grew up in a period where Jim Crow laws of racial oppression were the norm. It was how you lived your life. And he was a diminutive man, a short man, but boy, was he powerful. And his presence was amazing. And he was an avid storyteller. And I'm sure when I was younger, he probably told me a bunch of stories, but the story he told me the most that I'll share with you that impacted me when I was 17 and I was a senior in high school and getting ready to go off to college. He had shared with me, I said, Grandpa, I said, how come like we don't know our family? Like, how come we don't know anyone? And he told me that he fled the South when he was school age. He says he was probably around 9 or 10, but he was school age. And they said what made him leave the South was he observed the lynching of a family member as a child. And it so traumatized him, and he was so concerned about the conditions of where he was that he fled. And so when he left, he started traveling north. He followed the railroad trains. He worked on trains. He followed the circus. He made his way north to Perth Amboy, New Jersey, where he met this beautiful woman who ended up being my grandmother. And they moved across the water from Jersey to New York, and there began the family. But his story was really impactful to me because he said to me, he said one of the things he formerly regretted the most was, in his words, he never got that formal book learning. His education stopped in elementary school. And he was never able to go back because life hit him. When you were a young Black male on your own in those days, in those times, though you might have been a child age-wise, you were considered to be an adult. And so he mentioned that his biggest concern was not getting that formal book learning, and how if I had an opportunity to do that, he told me to do it because, in his words, he said, Jeff, that's the one thing they can never take away from you, is your education. Once you know something, you know it. And so that inspired me to get my education, and through the grace and hard work of many people, I earned my doctorate degree. And I went into education because I saw the importance and felt the need to give other people the opportunity to learn. And so whenever I need to, I tap into that story. And I think about the sacrifices that others have made and the missed opportunities that they had, and how I'm fortunate to have certain opportunities, and that I have an obligation. I have an obligation and accountability to them to take advantage of those opportunities and to not pass them by. Now, normally in this process, if we'd have more time, I'd give you an opportunity to do a silent reflection on your own why, and take a moment to think about what's your personal why that motivates you, that taps into you, that inspires you, and to give you the opportunity to do that. But I know that time is of the essence, so I will not do that today, but that's a critical piece. And the most critical thing is when you tap into your why, share your why. Intentionally listen to and share it with somebody, and listen to what someone has to say as they share your why. You will find, interestingly enough, we have so much more in common with each other than what we fail to sometimes recognize. And I think that's critically important. So some of the takeaways I like to have, or hope for you to take away today, is consistent reflection, focusing upon your why. It's an opportunity to promote, hopefully, inspiration, self-motivation, strategic thinking, intentional action, engaged behavior, the wonderful potential for positive relationship building. It can help open up that door for that cultural competency if you're engaging in stories and sharing with people who are different from yourself. And that communal connection in schools and in schoolhouses and in places of learning, that's so critically important. A place where people belong is so critically important. And I believe that having an opportunity to reflect upon what you do and sharing your stories about why you do it is one of the simple strategies to help promote these. So I'm going to ask you as my closing ask, please take the time, make the time to reflect. Don't forget your story, because you have one and your story matters. Share and relate your story. Encourage others to do the same. And important, remember that our students have a voice that also needs to be expressed, that they too have a why. Do you know it? Have you ever cared to listen? I want to thank you so much for your time today and for your engagement. And here's my contact information, and I hope that some of the things I shared with you today, I apologize for going slightly over, was impactful to you. Thank you.